Hey there, all you beautiful souls. I hope your day has been absolutely fantastic. It's a pleasure to have you back for yet another exciting episode of What If Naruto Became a Devil Ninja. Don't forget to pay a visit to the author of this captivating fanfiction and show them some love. You'll find the link waiting for you down in the description. If this what if is sparking your curiosity, drop a comment down below and share your thoughts. And while you're at it, don't miss out on exploring the plethora of other intriguing what ifs available on this very channel. Alright, let's not keep you waiting any longer, let's dive right into this thought-provoking video. It was the day they would leave, and Naruto and Kaneko were practicing their Senjutsu early that morning. Because of how different their methods were, their Senjutsu looked and acted nothing alike. Naruto's Senjutsu enhanced his overall physical abilities, granted his normal jutsu an intense boost in power, and allowed him to extend the range of his punches. Kaneko's, on the other hand, gave her increased control over illusions and the ability to shoot energy balls from her fists. Naruto also had the orange pigmentation and barred, golden eyes that came from using Toad-style Senjutsu. The only difference with Kaneko's features was that she had her ears and tail out. If Naruto had been asked which one he thought was better, he would have said his Senjutsu, though he had his reasons. As interesting as the abilities that Kaneko now had were, they didn't really hold a candle to the incredible boost in power that he received. His method of Senjutsu was also more versatile. Of course, he wasn't saying that Kaneko's Senjutsu was bad, or that it was weak. It was anything but. Kaneko also knew how to use her powers to her advantage. She was definitely turning into a little badass. Even now, as Naruto sat on the ground and gathered the natural energy around him, he watched Kaneko as she danced across the yard. Spheres of energy surrounded her. They danced around her as if she was a planet, and they were celestial bodies caught within her center of gravity. They swirled and moved and intersected paths, as she twirled with a grace that would have been the envy of dancers everywhere. It was beyond beautiful. The dance was over all too soon. Kaneko stopped moving, the spheres dispersed, and she wandered over to Naruto. "You're very pretty when you practice like that," Naruto said as Kaneko sat down next to him. "Thank you," she said, blushing as he handed her a water bottle. She took a drink from it, and then sighed as she set it between her legs. Leaning back, she placed her hands behind her to act as support for her body. Her face looked content, though hints of red still remained. Naruto let the natural energy that he'd been holding leave him. It was getting easier to control. Even the voices, which told him to kill everyone in sight, were becoming easier and easier to ignore. "Hey Naruto." Kaneko fiddled with the water bottle. "Have I become stronger?" Naruto was about to say, "Of course you've become stronger." But he paused after seeing the expression on her face. She was being serious. That meant she deserved a serious response. "I think you have grown a lot stronger since you and I first met," Naruto said slowly, carefully choosing his words. He wasn't used to thinking before speaking. "However, you still have a long way to go before you can fight any of the tougher opponents." "You mean like Kuroka-ni-san?" "Right. Like Kuroka." Naruto nodded. "She's a pretty tough cat. She's also reached full maturity, which means she has access to all of her power." "You know about our maturity?" "I know that a Nekomata doesn't reach full maturity until their tail splits," Naruto admitted with a shrug. "I know that yours hasn't split yet, and it won't for several more years. Once that happens, you'll have full access to your power, right?" Nekomata were a species whose power was locked until they reached a certain stage of maturity, namely, when their tail split in half to make it look like they had two. The time it took for them to reach maturity was different for every Nekomata. Some reached that stage early, while others were late bloomers. Kaneko was only 15 years old. The youngest record of a Nekomata gaining full maturity was 18, so she still had a ways to go. Until then, her body would remain tiny, which was how all Nekomata were. "I hadn't realized you knew so much about us," Kaneko said. "Well, I know a bit more than most." The truth was that Naruto had been speaking with Kuroka on this matter. Ever since he'd returned, in fact. It was only a matter of time before he and Kaneko took that next step in their relationship, so he wanted to be ready for when that time came. "Do you know about our, mating season?" "Yeah, I know about that, too," Naruto admitted. "Oh?" Kaneko trailed off. Naruto imagined she must have been feeling awkward now. She couldn't seem to look him in the face, and when she was caught staring at him from the corner of her eye, she turned away with a blush. "Maybe I should use more tact." "You don't have tact. It's never been my strong point." "Well, I think we've been out here for a bit too long." Naruto stood up and dusted off his pants. "Let's head inside and get cleaned up." we've got a big day today. Right? It was the beginning of summer vacation, and today was the day that he and the rest of Ria's peerage would be going to the underworld. There, they would take part in a series of competitions between the three factions. The event was supposed to be huge, which made sense. This was the first time that all three factions would be gathered like this. Of course, they had gathered for the peace conference, but that had only been with the leaders. Naruto had been informed by Rias that this event was going to play host to the regular citizens from every one faction. That meant it was as much a social event for the people, as it was a political one for the three factions. After taking a shower, Naruto went back into his room to get dressed. Rias was already awake. She was already fully dressed. Unlike most days, where she wore her school uniform, today she had elected to wear jeans and a t-shirt that wrapped around her bust like it was elastic. Sandals adorned her feet, and a necklace that Naruto had given her rested against her chest. "Oh, good morning, Naruto." She greeted him with a smile. "Rias. Morning." Naruto walked up behind Rias and slid his arms around her waist. He enjoyed the feeling of his front pressing against her back. On any other occasion, he probably would have ground his crotch against her butt cheeks to elicit a response. It was too bad they didn't have time this morning. Turning around in his arms, Rias gave him a kiss before sliding out of his grip. Smiling, she took his hand and said, "Ravel is cooking breakfast right now." "I know. I could smell it when I was wandering the hall." "Let's not keep her waiting, then. Hurry up and get dressed." Right? Ravel was, indeed, cooking breakfast when they entered the kitchen. Humming a small tune to herself, she was making what appeared to be pancakes. Given that sweets were her specialty, it made sense that she would make something sweet for breakfast. That morning, Ravel wore a simple pink gown, which swished around her ankles as she moved. It looked a lot like her normal outfit, except it didn't have the same level of ostentatiousness as the other one. This gown was more austere. It had less decorations and frills. She was currently barefoot, her feet padding lightly along the floor, and an apron had been thrown over her dress. "Good morning, Naruto-sama," Rias-sama, Ravel greeted. "Please sit down. Breakfast is almost ready." Kaneko and Irina were already sitting at the table. They were talking about something, though Naruto didn't know what. It looked like Irina had been giggling at something that Kaneko said. However, when he and Rias entered the room, they both clammed up. "I wonder what they were talking about." "You? Maybe." While Rias went over to a chair, Naruto wandered up to Ravel. The girl had turned her back to them again. It looked like she was putting the finishing touches on breakfast. Grinning, Naruto wrapped the blonde girl in a hug from behind. Ravel squeaked and nearly dropped the pan, but he grabbed it before she could get herself burnt. "Naruto-sama." "Morning, Ravel." Naruto nuzzled his nose against Ravel's hair. He paused as a familiar scent hit him. "Is it my shampoo?" "Ah. I was all out," Ravel stuttered. Is that a problem?" "No, I like it. Makes me feel like I've marked you somehow." "That's not something you should be saying," Ravel squawked. Naruto just laughed as he leaned down and kissed her on the cheek. "I'm just teasing." Ravel's cheeks looked like they'd caught fire. "That's not very nice." Giggling interrupted them. Naruto turned to look at Rias, Irina, and Kaneko. They appeared to have been talking about something, though they ceased talking when they noticed him looking at them. He frowned. "They were totally talking about me, weren't they?" "That is a reasonable assumption." "What time are we leaving for the underworld?" Irina asked as Naruto unwrapped his arms from around Ravel and sat down in the seat next to Kaneko. "We need to be at the station in an hour," Rias said. "Do you have everything packed?" Irina gave her a nervous smile. "Yes. Everything's ready." "You seem nervous." "Ah." Irina's cheeks colored. "This is my first time going to the underworld, so..." Rias placed a reassuring hand on Irina's, which rested on the table. "Don't worry too much. To be honest, the underworld isn't all that different from the human world, except, well, only devils and fallen angels live there. Right?" Irina didn't look very reassured. Ravel came over with everyone's breakfast and they began to eat. Naruto noticed that Ophis wasn't with them, sighed, and then stood up. "I'll be right back," he said. "I'm just going to get Ophis." Rias frowned at the mention of Ophis, but then she nodded. "All right. We'll keep a plate warm for you." "Thanks," Naruto said as he wandered out of the kitchen. "Really? What could that Ophis be up to?" Ophis frowned as she stood in front of a large mirror that was about 2 times taller than her. Scattered across her bed were several magazines that she had bought. Most of them were on human fashion and makeup, but a number of them were porn mags. She'd been doing a lot of research into human relationships, mostly because she lived with Naruto, who seemed to epitomize these things called bonds. Ophis didn't understand them. Thus, she sought to figure out what it was about relationships, about bonds, that made them so desirable. From what she had seen by watching Naruto interact with the other members of this house, relationships seemed to revolve around three things: petting, kissing, and sex, not necessarily in that order. Granted, Naruto did other things with everyone. He regularly sparred with Kaneko, Irina, Ravel, and Rias. He also went on dates with everyone but Irina. He helped out around the house. He also liked to spend nights cuddling with everyone in front of the television. However, when it came right down to it, every other activity usually ended with one of those three things happening. As a regular recipient to Naruto's head petting, Ophis understood the pleasure that came from it. She didn't understand why it felt so good. She only knew that it did. However, Ophis wanted to gain a deeper understanding of Naruto and relationships in general. All of the dating magazines that she had read so far mentioned the pleasures of being intimate with a lover. Apparently, dating, being in love, and having sex were things that healthy people like Naruto did. Ophis wanted to experience that for herself. Maybe if she understood what made it so desirable, she would understand why she liked Naruto's head petting so much. It would also help her understand Naruto, who intrigued her to no end. That was why, while everyone else sat down for breakfast, she remained holed up in her room, where she had been for the past several weeks. Ophis looked at her reflection in the full-body mirror. She was small, barely standing at 4 feet. Her long hair, blacker than raven feathers, trailed down her back. Flat-chested, thin arms and legs, she looked like a little girl in grade school. As she studied herself, Ophis recalled why she had chosen to take on this form. Small bodies were easier to travel in. People also seemed less inclined to impede her when she looked like a child, and girls garnered more sympathy than boys, though there were some people who had tried to kidnap her once or twice. They were dealt with easily enough. According to her magazines, when dating a person, it was important to have the type of body they enjoyed. Some people liked girls with lithe figures, while others liked busty girls. Her current figure was apparently called loli, which some people seemed to really like. Naruto didn't seem to have a preferred type. Kaneko was a loli, Rias was tall and busty, and Ravel was somewhere in between. Ophis didn't know what that meant. Did Naruto not have a type like the magazines had said? Had the magazines lied to her? Ophis studied her reflection. She was small, a lot smaller than Kaneko, who, despite being small, still looked her age. Frowning, Ophis made herself a little taller, stopping until she was exactly 20 centimeters taller than Kaneko. She frowned some more. This made her look like a really skinny teenager with long hair. It needs to be curvier. Nodding at her own thoughts, Ophis went about changing her body some more. First, she gave herself breasts. She thought about making them the same size as Ria's, but those didn't look comfortable, and she wanted to have more freedom to move. Big boobs would get in the way. She settled for a chest size that was similar to Irina's. Next, she made her hips wider while keeping her waist the same size, giving her what magazines called an ergless figure. Ophis cupped her breasts and hefted them up. They were heavy. She wondered what people saw in these. Was there some appeal to large breasts that she didn't understand? Letting her hands fall back to her sides, Ophis turned around and studied herself from behind. Her butt hadn't changed much. It was still round and small. She'd read that it was called a bubble butt, though she didn't know what that meant. Her butt didn't look like a bubble. Still, this was supposedly the ideal butt shape. All of the women that Naruto is dating have a butt like this. It was the one constant. Kaneko, Ravel, Rias, they all had a firm, tight backside that was shaped similarly, variations in size notwithstanding. She didn't know if that meant anything, but that was why she was experimenting. Suddenly, the door to her room opened and Naruto walked in. "Hey Ophis. You about ready to?" "Eh?" Ophis stared at Naruto, who stared back with slowly widening eyes. "I'm sorry," Naruto shouted as he rushed out of the room and slammed the door closed. Within the once more silent room, Ophis's frown became even more prominent. Does he not approve of my new appearance? She wondered, silently cupping her breasts again. After that embarrassing interlude with Ophis, Naruto had convinced the girl to come downstairs and eat. He'd gotten over his mortification easily enough. However, now he couldn't help but wonder about the little dragon god. Why had she been staring at herself in front of the mirror? Why had she been taller? Why did she have boobs? These were questions without answers. He thought about asking her, but then he thought better of it. Part of him was sure that he'd regret asking. Ophis had changed back into her small form for breakfast. They'd gone into the kitchen and finished eating. Then Naruto and his group grabbed their belongings for the trip and met up with Ashia, Issei, and Rainer, and then traveled to the train station. Akeno and Kiba were already there when they arrived. Of course, they would have been there sooner, but it took them nearly 20 minutes to convince Gaspar to come out of his box. The Hikikomori vampire had been quite adamant on not leaving. It had taken Kaneko having a moment of genius to make Gaspar leave. On a side note, Gaspar was now wearing a brown paper bag over his head. It had been another one of Kaneko's ideas. According to her, if no one could see his face, he wouldn't be afraid. Her idea, while sounding stupid, appeared to work marvelously. Gaspar didn't even seem to realize when he was surrounded by other people on the bus that took them to the station. The train station, as Rias called it, wasn't what Naruto would have called a station. Stations were places where hundreds of thousands of people walk through every day. They were busy, crowded, and filled with no's. In comparison, the station that Rias took them to was practically empty and only had a single train. Also, and this was another thing that had Naruto shaking his head, both the station and the train looked more expensive than most mansions. Nearly 2 times larger and 3 times longer than any train that Naruto had ever seen, the beautifully crafted steam engine was the epitome of opulence. Red and gold swirled together in a choreography of colors. The train shimmered in the light, the surface polished to a shine. Naruto could actually see his reflection on the glittering steel surface, even though he was standing several meters away. Standing in front of the train were 2 familiar figures. Like night and day, the pair couldn't have been more dissimilar. It wasn't just that one of them had wings of a purest white, and the others were blacker than a night sky. Azazel looked the same as always. Decked out in a long trench coat and grinning his fool's grin, he seemed to be saying something to a disgruntled and mortified Metatron. Naruto didn't know what they were saying. However, from the redness staining Metatron's cheeks, he guessed it was sexual in nature. Metatron might have been a ninja-obsessed idiot, but he was about as pure as they came. Upon seeing them, Azazel unwrapped his arm from Metatron's shoulder and grinned at the Gremory group. "Welcome, everyone. I'm glad to see you're all on time. Let's hop on board and get going. It takes a while to reach the underworld, and I want to get there as quickly as we can." "Someone's excited," Naruto mumbled into Ria's ear. "Maybe a little too excited," Rias agreed. "Ophis," Azazel cried out as if just now seeing the little dragon god. "It's lovely to see you again, and in such a cute form, too. This is a vast improvement from the old man you were the last time we met." Ophis regarded Azazel with an expression so blank that Naruto was reminded of someone who'd been slapped in the face with a dead fish. "Who are you?" she asked after a silent moment of staring. Azazel promptly fell flat on his face. Everyone boarded the train, which was even more extravagant on the inside than the outside. Naruto's feet sank into the plush red carpet as he stepped in, gazing at the dark red walls and the ribbed ceiling. Rather than having several chairs lining the sides like a normal train, there were numerous couches centered around tables. All of them were posh and elegant, the kind he'd expect to see in a ritzy 5-star hotel. This place reminded Naruto more of a lounge than the compartment of a train. They split up into their own little groups. Issei and Ashia sat together. Rainer dithered behind the two. Occasionally, she would glance at them, bite her lip, and then she'd look away with a huff. Akeno sat as far from Issei as possible. Naruto had the distinct impression that she was trying to avoid even looking in their direction. Naruto sat in the center with Rias, Ravel, Kaneko, and Ophis. Irina had wandered over to Issei and Ashia, probably to engage her childhood friend in conversation. Rainer's scowl grew more fierce when she saw this. Kiba and Gaspar sat with Naruto and his group. As the train took off, Naruto looked at Rias. "So, how's this thing going to take us to the underworld? I thought the underworld was in another dimension or something." "The train crosses the barrier between the human world and the underworld," Rias explained. "There's a gateway that this train passes through, and that gateway is where we placed a checkpoint that will open the barrier for us to reach the underworld." "Huh. Neat." Rias raised an eyebrow. "You don't sound very excited." Grinning sheepishly, Naruto scratched the back of his head. "It's not that. I just thought there might have been a more, interesting explanation." "Not everything is going to be exciting," Naruto-sama, Ravel chided him as if he were a child. She was sitting next to Kaneko, who, for once, was not using his lap as a chair. He guessed it was because the two girls had been talking about something before he'd asked about the train. Since they had been whispering, he didn't know what their conversation was about. He hoped they weren't talking about him, or if they were, that they were only saying good things. "I guess not," he admitted, looking around. This place looked like it could fit over 100 people. This train is kinda big, isn't it? Do we really need this much space? This train belongs to the Gremory family, Ria said. I'm sure you've noticed by now, but we devils enjoy flaunting our wealth. Devil families are constantly competing with each other, Ravel added. We're always trying to one-up one another in displays of strength and prestige. That's one of the reasons raiding games are so popular. It allows us to display our strength to other devils, which increases our prestige in return. Riaz nodded. The Gremory family is also one of the 72 pillars. We're elite, so we like to show that to everyone. That reminded him of the nobles that he'd known in the elemental nations. The daimyos, in particular, seemed intent on displaying how wealthy they were to each other. It was like bragging rights. Naruto didn't get it. I don't understand the need for such things, Ophis said, her bland eyes staring at the opulent interior. If you wanted to travel to the underworld, I can just rip a hole through this dimension. I'd prefer to not have someone I don't fully trust tearing holes through time and space, Ria said dryly. Ophis looked like she wanted to pout. The hours passed idly spent chatting or playing games. Irina, Issei, and Ashia eventually joined them in a game of cards. Rainer looked like she wanted to join, but was too proud to say so out loud. Akeno stared at the group longingly, as if fighting the urge to come over with them, but then she would look away again. After playing a few games of cards, several members of the group fell asleep. The trip to the underworld apparently took several hours. Nero didn't know why it took so long, but he also didn't ask. Kaneko and Ravel lay side by side on the couch, looking adorable as they slept together. Issei and Ashia were leaning against each other on another couch. Rainer had also finally sat down next to them. She would occasionally look at Issei's lap, as if she was contemplating using it as a pillow, and then look away. Gasper had also fallen asleep after Kaneko had chazzed him all over the carriage. Naruto, Riaz, Irina, Ophis, and Kiba found another place to sit, away from the others and by the window. Ophis was sitting on Naruto's lap, having demanded that he pet her. They had already passed through the barrier, which meant that, instead of a vast colorless void, Naruto was staring at a massive plot of land that looked honestly not that much different from the human world. There were mountains and plains and cities. The only difference that he could see was the purple sky that spread out over their heads. Naruto had been told that, originally, both day and night had the same sky, but the 4 demon kings had changed it, so the underworld had a night. This was done because the vast majority of devils were reincarnated humans, and the lack of night messed with their ability to function. We should be arriving at one of the cities in Gremory territory soon, Riaz informed Naruto. She was leaning against him, resting her head on his shoulders. A while ago, she and Irina had been speaking animatedly about what the exorcists should expect while in the underworld. Now Irina was staring at the passing scenery like he was. Have you been to the Gremory estate, Kiba? Naruto asked. The last time he'd been to the underworld, he'd not visited the estate, but one of the Gremory family's other mansions. He remembered during that time he'd taken Ravel out into a nearby city, and found a nice ramen shop. A few times, Kiba said. We usually travel to the underworld at least once a year, so I've gone every year since I've become a devil. I'm still kind of nervous, Irina admitted, her voice soft. Don't get me wrong. I don't dislike devils, but I'm so used to us being enemies that traveling to the underworld with them is nerve-wracking. I guess that's understandable, Ria said. But you shouldn't think of it like that. If you did, then wouldn't the fact that you've been living with devils for the past few months be even more nerve-wracking? The expression on Irina's face was that of a child who'd just been told the secrets to life. I never thought of it like that. I think it's time we all started thinking like that, Ria said. Irina nodded and went into a thoughtful silence. I wonder where Azazel and Metatron are, Naruto said after a time. I haven't seen them since they greeted us. I expected Azazel, at least, to come in and bother us. They're not on the train, Ophis said with certainty. I think they went on ahead. Riaz shifted, moving a little closer and holding his arm. There are other ways to enter the underworld, and I believe that as high-ranking members of their respective societies, they're likely busy dealing with political matters. Makes sense? Naruto nodded. The train eventually pulled into a station and slowed to a stop. A glance out the window revealed dozens, no, hundreds of people standing outside. All of them were staring at the train. Their eyes contained a frightening intensity, a maniacal gleam that made Naruto wonder about their sanity. He would have backed away, but Riaz was on his other side. Why are there so many people? Irina asked the question that he wanted to know himself. They're here to see Riaz, Kiba said, lips twisting into a sardonic smile. You probably don't know this, but Riaz is a popular figure in the underworld. Not only that, but we're in her family's territory. Everyone here is under the protection of the Gremory family, so they know her very well. Ha, so Rias is something of a celebrity, then? Naruto glanced at his blushing girlfriend, whose cheeks reminded him of fire hydrants. Not something of a celebrity, Kiba corrected. She is a celebrity. Oh? Naruto, Kiba said, his voice suddenly serious. Yes. Be prepared for a lot of hate. Pwah. Naruto had absolutely no idea what Kiba meant by that. However, after waking up the others and exiting the train, he soon realized exactly what Kiba was talking about. The moment they exited the train, a great roar went up. Applause echoed across the station like thunder striking the ground. People cheered and whistled. They were going wild. Naruto even saw signs being held aloft, all of which said, "Welcome home, Rias Gremory," in big bold print. Men wolf whistled and women squealed. Everyone looked at her like she was the second coming of Satan. Naruto walked next to Rias as they stepped down from the station. There was a staircase that was clear of onlookers, and a path was being kept open by several armed devils in armor, which lead to a chariot. Rias-sama. Look over here, Rias-sama. You're so beautiful. We love you. People cried out as Rias walked past them. It seemed like everyone had a terrible case of hero worship, or perhaps even an obsession, for his girlfriend. Rias seemed to be more loved than what he believed was natural. Even the Hokage hadn't been this loved. Who is that person standing with her? I don't know, but he does look kind of familiar. I know who he is. He's the one who beat Riser to a pulp. So, he's Risa-sama's new peerage member. They're standing awfully close together, don't you think? Damn bastard. I already want to kill him for standing so close to Rias-sama. Great. These people are jealous and they don't even know who I am. Imagine how much they'll love you once they discover that you and Rias are sharing a bed. Naruto shuddered at Kurama's words. I hope they don't find out for a while. That said, if they try anything, I'll kick their asses. The group entered the chariot that would take them to the Gremory estate. Sitting with Rias on one side, Ravel on the other, Kaneko on his lap, and Ophis glaring at Kaneko from the opposite seat, Naruto consigned himself to a long ride. The Gremory grounds surrounding the estate covered 265 square kilometers of land. It wasn't just a single type of terrain either. The chariot they rode in moved past mountains, plains, forests, and hills. Naruto was impressed, but at the same time, he wondered what they did with all this land. Surely, there had to be some purpose to it. Right? More impressive than the surroundings was the house. As they pulled up to the entrance and exited the chariot, Naruto couldn't help but gawk at the massive mansion, which looked more like a castle to him. Towers jutted into the sky like the spires of a mountain. Grand columns and flying buttresses were the decor of the day. Even the door, which appeared to have been made from an expensive wood that glistened with a polished sheen, looked more costly than an entire pantheon of high-end sports cars. Is this seriously where Rias and her family live? Issei squawked. I mean, I know they're loaded with more money than I've got sperm cells, but this is ridiculous. What are they? Royalty? Yes, Kaneko answered. Ria's family is one of the 72 pillars. That's essentially royalty right there. Didn't you know that? I didn't, Issei confessed. Kaneko deadpanned. Idiot. As two servants held the doors to the estate open, Naruto and the others proceeded inside. Welcome home, Oju-sama. The choir of maids and butlers chorused. Naruto wanted to rub his eyes. Standing in two single-file lines on either side of a red carpet were several dozen butlers and maids. White and black, frills and slacks, corsets and penguin suits. They stood with their heads bowed in reverence. Their expression, incapable of being hidden, were filled with joy. Yet somehow, each one remained refined, even in their gaiety, as if they could do nothing but show off their pride as servants to the house of Gremory. Standing in front of them, before the stairs, was none other than Grafia Lucifage, Surzich's wife and maid. Rias-sama and her peerage. Grafia bowed to the group. I am pleased to see that you have arrived safely. If you follow me, I will show you to your rooms. Grafia didn't give them a chance to respond. She turned on her heel and walked up the stairs, forcing the others to follow, lest they lose sight of her. Naruto and Rias caught up to her first. Unlike the others, who hung back, they walked by her side. Are mom and dad home? Rias asked. They currently are not, Grafia answered. They were held up at a meeting with the other leaders of the three-faction alliance. She paused. I believe they are discussing the upcoming event, working out the last details, and determining what sort of security will be put in place. That must have been the meeting that Azazel and Metatron were at. Despite one of them being a perverted idiot and the other a ninja-obsessed idiot, both were leaders of their factions. Metatron was an archangel, the voice of God, and Azazel was the leader of the Gremory. Naruto wondered what sort of meeting they were holding. Rooms were split up into 4 groups. Kiba and Gasper were placed in a room together. Akeno and Irina received their own rooms. Issei and Ashia were given a room together. Meanwhile, I'm sleeping with Naruto. I also want to sleep with Naruto-sama. Grafia stared at Ravel and Kaneko. While Kaneko returned the maid's stare with a bland one of her own, Ravel blushed bright red under the cool woman's unwavering gaze. Her head had also caught fire. Naruto thought of using a water jutsu to put it out, but since Ravel was a phoenix, he thought better of it. I'm also going to sleep in the same room as Naruto, Ophis announced. The staring switched from Ravel and Kaneko to Ophis. Grafia met the infinite dragon god's stare for several seconds, and then blanched. Naruto wondered if she had figured out who Ophis was, or if she merely felt the power that rolled off the little dragon in resonating waves. Naruto said nothing, but that was mostly because he wasn't sure what to say. He was also pretty sure that anything he did say would have somehow made the situation worse. So, even you can learn. That's a harsh thing to say. Ryasama? Grafia questioned. Looking between the 3 girls, her eyes staring deeply into theirs as if she was contemplating something, Rias eventually sighed and nodded. They can sleep with us. You're the best, Bucho. Thank you very much, Ryasama. Ophis said nothing, but from the expression on her face, which was lit in a half-smile, Naruto could tell that she was satisfied. Rias merely replied with a wan smile. Naruto wasn't sure what to think about their sleeping arrangements, but that was why he left it up to Rias. If she thought that Kaneko, Ravel, and Ophis sleeping with them was okay, then it was fine. That said, he wasn't sure how this would work. True, Ria's bed was quite large, stupidly so, but still, was it really alright for all 5 of them to share a bed? Wouldn't that be awkward? It's fine, Ria said as everyone put away their belongings. Kaneko and I have slept together before. She, myself, and Akeno used to have sleepovers all the time. We'd sleep in the same bed back then, too. Were you naked during those times too? Of course I was. You know I hate sleeping with clothes on. Despite trying to stop himself, Naruto ended up picturing younger Rias and Kaneko sleeping naked together. It wasn't that stimulating. Actually, it was pretty gross. He blanched. Rias looked at his face and snorted as if she knew what he was thinking. A little ways behind them, Kaneko and Ravel were chatting as they put their clothes away. Well, it was more like Kaneko was teasing Ravel, whose luminescent blush could have been seen, even from far away. Naruto could actually feel the heat from her blush. As for what they were talking about. Do you think a threesome or an orgy would be better? What the heck are you saying? I'm just asking how you'd like your first time to be. Don't say things like that. And I wouldn't want my first time to be either of those. Naruto rubbed his face. Maybe it was just him, but Kaneko had been getting a bit more lewd. Her jokes were becoming more crass as time went on. He wondered if something was up. He was tempted to ask. However, he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Someone grabbing at his sleeve made him look down. Ophis, who'd been unobtrusively walking beside him, was staring at him with a bland expression. White hair is talking about sex, right? Kaneko stopped arguing with Ravel to stare at Ophis. Who are you calling white hair? Naruto didn't know how to respond to Ophis's question, but since he was sure she already knew what sex was, he guessed it was best to be honest. Yes, she is. I see. Ophis went silent. Naruto waited for a moment to see if she would say more. When she didn't, Naruto looked up at Rias, who spotted his questioning glance and shrugged. She didn't know what was up either, apparently. After they had packed everything away, Grafia returned and asked them to follow her. It seemed Ria's family had returned from the meeting and wished to have tea with them. They met up with the others and were then led into a large room that, like all of the other rooms, held an appearance that was beyond exorbitant. It was about the same size as his old apartment. The soft carpet was like a pillow under their feet as they walked across the room. Walls decorated with expensive artwork, stained glass windows, and bookshelves filled with tomes made the place feel like an extremely rich snob's library. There were 2 people sitting at a small table with 4 chairs. Naruto recognized them from the dinner after their raiding game with Riser Phoenix. One of them was a man with red hair like Ria's, a trimmed goatee, and a refined aura. The other, a beautiful woman who could have been Ria's older sister, sat with a calming yet somehow mischievous aura. Rias. The man greeted, standing up and giving Rias a hug. It's been a long time since we've seen you. Oh, I've missed you so much. Dad. A flustered Rias squirmed in her father's grip. Not in front of my peerage. Ha 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 ha. Don't worry. Don't worry. They can give me a hug too. Dad. While Ria's old man laughed, her mother stood up and graced Naruto with a smile. Naruto, Venelana greeted. It has been a long time since we've last seen each other. You're looking well. Naruto, for the first time in a while, wasn't sure what to do. It seemed as if he was being singled out for some reason. Was it because he was dating Rias? That had to be it. He hoped she wasn't upset with him. Thank you, Gremory. Sama. Venelana's lips twitched. Was she grinning? Why are you being so formal? I would much prefer it if you called me Mom. Mother. Venelana gave them a beatific smile. After having their fun at their daughter's expense, Ria's parents bade her and Naruto to sit down. It wasn't until this moment that Naruto realized what he thought this was. He sort of hoped it wasn't that, though. The last thing he needed was her parents butting into his and Ria's relationship. Of course, they're her parents, so maybe they're just worried. They're devils, Naruto. Do you really think they'd be worried like normal parents? Well, I guess not. Still, I can hope, right? To be young and delusional. We're very glad that you could come all this way, Rias, dear, Venelana said. Especially because we have so much to discuss. Indeed. Ria's father, who introduced himself as Ajuka's Gremory, nodded. In particular, your mother and I wanted to discuss your plans for the future. Sitting beside Naruto, Rias twitched. My plans for the future. You mean you want to know whether or not Naruto and I plan on getting married, don't you? That's what this is really about, isn't it? Venelana and Ajuka looked at each other, and Naruto felt like he could see the chakra churning through their bodies. He wanted to groan. Did they really think they could get away with this, and not expect Rias to figure out what they were doing? Their act was so blatantly obvious that even he knew what they were doing, and he was about as dense as people came when it involved matters like this. I'll second that. Shush you. We weren't thinking about that at all, Ajuka said. Venelana gave her daughter a charming smile. Though now that you've mentioned it, how are the two of you getting along? Rias glared at the two. We are getting along just fine. We also don't need you butting in. I sense a catfight. So do I. Rias, dear, there's no need to get upset. We're merely asking our daughter about a relationship with the man that she is seeing. Surely, there's nothing wrong with that. Naruto could already see how this would go down. Venelana and Ajuka were going to double-team Rias until she grew tired, frustrated, or flustered, and then they would turn their attention on him. He was sure they'd try and do something stupid like ask when he planned to propose. From his understanding, marriage, or rather, the union between a man and a woman that would create a strong devil child, was an important component to their society. It was well documented that devils did not produce children easily. Indeed, the ratio between the number of devil children being produced over human children was about 10,000 to 1. Of course, this was for pureblood devils. Half-breeds, or rather, children born from reincarnated devils, were more common. Knowing that this was about marriage and children, Naruto sought to head it off. If our family were any other family, and you two regular parents, there would not be a problem. But I know how you two are, and I know what you're trying to achieve. Naruto and I will advance our relationship at our own pace, Rias said before Naruto could even open his mouth. A stare-down took place between Rias and her two parents, though it seemed as if Rias was the only one taking it seriously. Venelana and Ajuka seemed more amused than confrontational. The rest of Rias' peerage shifted behind them. Naruto imagined they were all uncomfortable being present for this conversation. He did have to wonder why they'd moved into such a heavy topic so soon. Were they attempting to catch Rias off guard? Perhaps you should calm down, Rias, Ajuka said. I am perfectly calm. Rias scowled. Venelana frowned at her daughter. Do not take that tone right now, Rias Gremory. You might not realize it, but thanks to what happened with Riser Phoenix, our standing in the underworld has taken a nosedive. What? Rias leaned back as if struck. Venelana. Ajuka said, a tone of warning in his voice. The tone went unheeded. Well, no one has been able to say anything against you, since you did win the rating game. The truth is that many people are questioning our decision to let you have your way. My husband and I no longer have the clout that we used thanks to the other pillar's loss of confidence in us. Even your brother has taken hits lately. Senjutsu has. I know that you wish to control who, how, and when you marry. However, the fact is that we're now in a precarious position. You have to understand, Rias, we're on your side. We want what is best for you. We want you to be happy. At the same time, politics are forcing you to take a proactive approach in your daughter's relationship, Rias finished. Yes. Venelana nodded. Ria's shoulders slumped. Her face took on an exhausted appearance, as if she'd been run ragged for several months. I understand. I'm sorry for snapping at you. While Ajuka looked stunned, as if he'd not expected his headstrong daughter to apologize, then Alana nodded in what seemed like satisfaction. So long as you understand. Now then, why don't you tell us how you and Naruto are getting along? Conversation became a lot more relaxed after Ria's calmed down. Naruto still felt awkward, however, as he was just quietly sitting there while Ria spoke. He wanted to say something as well, to add his problem was that he really didn't know what to say. His girlfriend also seemed much more adept at explaining the situation than he was. Behind him, Naruto finally heard Issei speak up. So, can anyone tell me what that was all about? Ah, good old Issei, asking the question that I wanted to ask. Surprisingly, it was Akeno who answered him. A union between two households is a powerful political tool. It's a common practice for two pureblood devils of a powerful household to get married, such as the union between Lord and Lady Gremory. It's even more of a powerful tool when a child is conceived as a result. Oh? Issei seemed unsure of what to say. Naruto didn't blame him. The poor guy must have been conflicted speaking to his ex. Consequently, because Naruto-san is a reincarnated devil, there are even more issues. Of course, most of these have been swept aside thanks to how he utterly destroyed Riser Phoenix. I wouldn't say he destroyed my brother, Ravel mumbled. Akeno ignored her. Unfortunately, if Lord and Lady Gremory wish to be seen as strong leaders among their kind, then they need to be seen as taking a more active hand in Ria's nuptials, especially since they were the ones who originally arranged the marriage between Riser and Rias. I'm not sure I understand, Ashia said softly enough that Naruto almost missed her speaking. She means that it needs to seem as if Lord and Lady Gremory were the ones who got Naruto-sama and Ria-sama together. It will make it seem as if that was their plan all along. This will make their standing within Devil Society rise again, Ravel explained. That sounds really complicated. Naruto didn't say anything, because he was still sitting quietly and trying his best not to squirm, but he totally agreed with Issei's assessment. Life is complicated, Kaneko added, mirroring Naruto's thoughts perfectly. After having tea with Ryu's parents, the group had gone to take a dip in the Gremory family's hot springs. Like the rest of the mansion, the hot springs were designed to showcase the family's wealth. Built like a Greek bathhouse, the space was filled with Corinthian columns and floral designs along the wall. Naturally, the men and women's sides were separated. There were two people already in the men's side of the hot spring when Naruto and the others arrived. They sat slightly apart, one of them relaxing with a saucer of sake in one hand, and the other frowning moodily at the sake drinking one. Azazel-sensei. Issei gawked. Metatron, Naruto sighed. Ah, ninja-sama. Metatron's demeanor brightened as he greeted Naruto with a reverent smile. Come in. Let us partake in the act of skinship. Please don't say something that could be so easily misleading, Naruto mumbled as he nonetheless waded into the water. I'm guessing your meeting is over. Yep, Azazel said as Kiba, Issei, and Gasper also sat down. Naruto noted with wry amusement that Gasper was still wearing a bag over his head. The meeting ended about an hour ago. We returned with Zeoticus and Surzichus. Surzichus is here? Kiba asked. Azazel shook his head. Surzichus had to leave immediately after because he got an important call from Beelzebub. Anyway, after everyone is done in the hot springs, I can tell you what the plan is going onwards. You mean for the three factions competition? Naruto asked. That too, but also what we're going to be doing. Ninja-sama, ninja-sama. Naruto sighed. Yes, Metatron. What is it? Let me scrub your back, Metatron said seriously. As he gave the ninja-obsessed angel a flat stare, Naruto realized something important that day. Metatron was a complete idiot. Once everyone had their fill of the hot springs, they adjourned to one of the many sitting rooms. Naruto sat with Kaneko, Ravel, and Rias on a large couch. Issei and Ashia had taken the other couch with Kiba and Gasper sitting on either end. Irina didn't seem to know where she should sit, so she had opted to stand. Rainer had, for a time, looked at the spot right next to Issei, but then she huffed and moved to stand behind the couch. Meanwhile, Akeno sat on a chair further away from the others. Azazel and Metatron stood apart from each other, but it was clear that both of them were going to offer up their opinions. Ophis had gone missing. Naruto didn't know where she was, but he wasn't worried. She was too powerful for something to happen to her. I'm sure you all know by now that the original plan for this trip was going to be a gathering of young devils, Azazel began. That's been changed since the three-faction alliance has decided to make this an event that brings all of us closer together. Instead of being a gathering of young devils, it's become a gathering of the brightest and most promising members from all three factions. Metatron picked up where Azazel left off. Tomorrow, all of you will be traveling to Lilith, the capital city here in the underworld. There, you'll be introduced to the leaders of the three factions and the people who are going to become your peers. The idea here is to foster and promote friendship between the three factions, particularly the youngest members, who lack the inborn hatred for each other that many of the older generation has. It was a good idea. Getting rid of the hatred between the three factions wasn't as simple as deciding to form an alliance. Old hatreds didn't die that easily. Enmity could never truly be erased after such a long and bitter struggle. Therefore, the easiest way to bridge the gap, so to speak, was for the young people, those who hadn't lived through the bitter wars that led to the current state of affairs, to come together and form alliances and friendships. It was politicking at its finest. Ryuz was nodding along with their words, and Naruto realized that she already knew what was going on. This must have been part of what she had been planning. Knowing her, she had probably been staying up late every night, trying to find the most efficient method of fostering friendships between the factions. She's doing her best to help her brother achieve his dream. Naruto hadn't spoken with Surziches in a while, but he knew that the Demon King's biggest goal was to finally end the hatred between the angels, devils, and the fallen. It was the goal that he'd been working toward for the past 50 years or so. Even though she complained, Ryuz always worked hard to help her brother further his goals. "Who's going to be at this gathering?" asked Issei. "There are numerous people from all three factions who will be there," Azazel answered. "On the devil's side, there's Diodora Astaroth, Sigvera Gairs, Seriarg Baal, Zephyrdor Glaciolabolas, and Sona Citri." "That's a ridiculous name," Naruto muttered. "Who the hell would want such a long name?" "Shush," Ryuz hushed him, tapping on his thigh. "The angels only have 3 people participating in the competition," Metatron admitted. "Angelus, Israel, and Ryul. They're currently the only new generation of angels who have a full set of brave saints. Unlike the devils, who've been capable of reincarnating humans for centuries thanks to Beelzebub, and the fallen, who regained their ranks every time an angel fell from grace, the angels were the only faction that had been losing members. This was because angels didn't have reincarnation, and without God's power and grace, it was impossible to create new angels. Every time an angel fell, they lost another member. Every time an angel died, they were unable to be replaced. Until Beelzebub helped them create the Brave Saint system, which could be used to reincarnate humans as angels, the angel faction had been steadily losing ground. If things had continued as they had, the angels would have been the first of the 3 factions to go extinct. "What about the fallen side?" asked Travel. "Who's coming?" "We have 4 fallen angels coming with their legions," Azazel told them. "Buer, Gremory, Lix Tetrax, and Mystima. Most of them are good kids. The only one you'll really need to worry about is Mystima. He's a bit of a hothead, that one." It looked like there were a lot of people attending. Naruto imagined that with 12 different peerages showing up, this was going to be a fairly large event, especially if most of the people attending had a full peerage. Evil Pieces had a total of 16 peerage members. Brave Saints had 13. Azazel hadn't named his system yet, but it apparently also had 13 members to it. This meant that if everyone minus Ryu's peerage, which only had 8 members, had a full peerage, they would have 142 people with just them. That wasn't including the leaders who would show up, the nobles who'd come to politic, or the citizens who would arrive to partake in whatever festivities were to be had. "What can you tell us about the people from the Angel and Fallen faction?" asked Ryuz. "We actually can't tell you anything other than what we've already told you," Azazel said. "Part of our goal in all this is to foster friendships. We're hoping that by going in blind, everyone will be on equal footing. This will be important since the people we want you to make friends with are going to be young and prideful." Metatron-sama, none of the angels you mentioned sound familiar to me," Irina said. "That's because they're relatively new to this world," Metatron told her. "All of them are 15 or 16 years old, like you." "I thought new angels couldn't be born," Ryuz said. Metatron shook his head. "New angels cannot be made. God is the only one who can create angels. However, thanks to Michael-sama, it is possible for angels to give birth to children via natural reproduction." "I thought sex was a sin," Naruto muttered. "That is not quite true, Ninja-sama." Metatron raised his pointer finger as if emphasizing his point. "Lust is a sin. However, sex in and of itself is not. The problem is that birthing an angel requires both parties to be a complete piece while the process is happening. If they feel lust, then not only will both angels become fallen, but their child will be born a fallen as well." Ha. Naruto thought about that for a moment and then slowly nodded. Yeah. I can see how that would work, I think. Sounds like a pain, though. It is quite difficult, Metatron agreed. That is at least half of the reason we angels do not have many children. The 3 who are going to the gathering are the first 3 children we've had in over 200 years, because angels kept falling during the process. That was a long time, like, a really long time. Naruto couldn't even imagine 200 years. Hearing that a group of individuals hadn't been able to produce kids in that long sounded ridiculous. Azazel clapped his hands. Anyway, now that you know what the plan is, you're all free to do whatever you want for the rest of the day. Just be sure to get a good night's sleep. We'll be leaving tomorrow afternoon. Everyone woke up early the next morning and, after getting dressed and eating a light breakfast, they were taken to the chariot that would drive them to the train station. Fortunately, there were no fans to greet them this time. Once they had boarded the train, Naruto, who was tenderly scratching Kaneko's cat ears while she sat with her head in his lap, asked Rias a question that had been bugging him since they entered the underworld. Why the hell do devils use trains so much? Rias shifted in her seat. Sitting next to her, Ravel peered at Kaneko with envious eyes. Ophis, who appeared to be reading a magazine he didn't know what it was about, glanced up before she went back to her reading. It's because they're convenient, mostly, Rias admitted. Of course, we do have the ability to warp from place to place, but warping into another person's home, or to a political function, is considered bad manners. So it's frowned upon. Yes, but there are also more practical reasons. Rias paused. Trains are easy to maintain, and they don't cost much to build. It's also much easier to build railways than it is to build roadways. This is especially true for traveling through the entire underworld. We do have other modes of transportation, Ravel added, tearing her eyes away from the purring Kaneko. But all of them are only city-wide. For example, we have subways similar to the ones in Japan, and we also have light rails that travel through most parts of our cities. Most people also can't afford something like a car, Rias continued. The underworld doesn't have the same resources that the human world has. In fact, one of the reasons for the continued fighting between devils and the fallen was because of the underworld's distinct lack of natural resources. Ha! Naruto mumbled as Ravel huffed, stood up, and walked up to them. I didn't realize natural resources were a problem. They're always a problem, Rias said. Even in the human world. Naruto didn't dispute that. Humans people were always fighting over resources, even when they didn't necessarily need them. Greed was a well-known human trait. Hey, scoot your head over, Ravel said to Kaneko. Kaneko looked up, and then immediately placed her head back on Naruto's lap. Don't wanna. Ravel's face turned red. I want to sit. I want to do that too. Then you should have gotten here first. Ravel seemed moments away from erupting. Naruto wondered if he should do something, like, try to find a compromise or whatever. Fortunately or unfortunately, Ophis chose that moment to close her magazine, which disappeared into a distortion within the air. She then stood up and, without ceremony, shoved Kaneko off of his lap and sat down. Pet me, she demanded. From the petulant expression on her face, she seemed to be stewing over something. Naruto might have said something, but Kaneko and Ravel chose that moment to talk over him. What do you think you're doing? Ravel screamed. Get off Naruto, lap stealer, Kaneko said with accusing eyes. No, Ophis was quite decisive. Thus came the argument. Get off Naruto-sama right now. No? I'm gonna shove your head in a toilet. I'll warp you to the void. I'll fry you. Naruto was petting me. I don't care. As the argument swiftly devolved into one that appeared minutes away from becoming a fist fight, Naruto, feeling quite helpless, looked at Rias for advice. Her smirk told him all he needed to know. You brought this on yourself, she said, causing his shoulders to slump. Life was so unfair sometimes. Lilith, the capital of the underworld, was a metropolis that could have rivaled the greatest cities in the human world. Skyscrapers towered over the land. Highways with trains and monorail systems flowed between buildings. At ground level, smaller buildings that were no less impressive in how modern they appeared dotted the landscape. If Naruto hadn't known any better, he would have said this place was just another human city. Of course, human cities did not have people flying through the air on black wings. After getting off the train, they were taken the rest of the way in a carriage that had been waiting for them, though it wasn't actually a carriage, but an expensive limousine. For some reason, the devils just called it a carriage. He guessed it was because they were an old-fashioned bunch. They must use limos for important functions like this. Probably. It's most likely the Gremory family's personal limo. I bet they're letting us use it as a means of showing off. That wouldn't surprise me. The place where they were being taken to was a massive skyscraper in the city's epicenter. It was easily the largest building there, a gleaming tower of steel and glass, which rose so high it looked like it could pierce the sky. Naruto was reminded of the skyscrapers in the human world. This had such a modern look that he almost couldn't believe it had been built in the underworld. Then again, I wasn't really sure what I should have expected from the underworld. Their limousine drove them to a small garage, which had an elevator that all of them stepped into. Naruto noted with no small amount of shock that even elevators here were massive. The doors to the elevator opened, revealing an expansive hallway with soft carpet and cream walls. Columns lined the wall at even intervals, and between those columns was a work of art. Naruto was amused to notice that all of the art looked like demonic replicas of human artwork. One of them even looked like the Mona Lisa, except she had horns and black wings. At the end of the hallway was a set of double doors, which were being guarded by one devil, and one guards opened the doors for Rias and her group. Naruto, standing at the front, his arm linked with Rias, walked past the guards and strolled inside. An expansive room opened up before them. It wasn't just large. It was gargantuan. Naruto couldn't begin to guess its size, but he judged the room to be at least several times larger than any room in his Japanese-style mansion back home. White marble tiles lined the floor. Intricate designs swirled inside of the tiles. A mosaic decorated the roof, colorful swirls and patterns that had little rhyme or reason to them, but were nonetheless aesthetically appealing. There were already a lot of people present, some angels, some devils, and some fallen. It was a mixed group, that was for sure. Of course, calling it mixed was a misnomer as well, for it implied that the three factions were mixing, which they were not. There was a clear division between the three. It seemed no one was willing to bridge the gap, despite their leaders agreeing to form an alliance. Naruto leaned over to whisper into Ria's ear. "It seems kind of tense in here, doesn't it?" "That's to be expected," Rias whispered back. "We may have agreed to become allies, but just because we decided to form alliance doesn't automatically make us friends. It's going to take a lot more work for that to happen." Even though Rias said this as if it was to be expected, Naruto sensed the disappointment in her tone. Rias had been spending over a month preparing for this. She'd been working every night to help her brother with this alliance. It must have been disappointing to see that, in spite of all the work she put into helping her brother, the devil, angel, and fallen factions weren't willing to extend each other an olive branch. "In that case, perhaps we should make a few rounds," Naruto suggested. The smile that Rias gave him told Naruto that he'd said the right thing. "I was thinking the exact same thing." Naruto and Rias turned to the others. "I'd like all of you to go out and mingle," Rias said. "If possible, please try and make the fallen and angel factions feel at ease." "I guess we don't much choice," Kiba said, smiling. "I'll do what I can to smooth things over on the fallen side." I can speak to some of the angels," Irina said. "I'll tell them that devils aren't bad people." "Issei," Rias said, "since you're closer to Azazel than the rest of us, why don't you and Ashi go with Kiba? Reiner can go with you." "Don't treat me like an afterthought," Reiner snapped. "I'm going with you too," Kaneko said, to which Rias merely shrugged and agreed. "I would also like to go with Naruto-sama and Rias-sama." "I can help you too," Ravel said. "I'm going to get some food," Ophis determined as she walked off. Naruto noticed, with mixed emotions, that the magazine she'd been reading on the train was now tucked underneath her arm. "Well," Rias started, "shall we go?" "Wait." Ravel stopped them. Naruto and Rias looked at her. Blushing, Ravel walked up to his other side and linked her arm with his free arm. "Okay. Now we can go." Right." Naruto took a deep breath. "Let's go." With Rias acting as their guide, and Ravel providing whispered commentary to him, Naruto began learning the ins and outs of who was who in the devil world. There were quite a few noble families, although few of those families belonged to the 72 pillars, which were the pinnacle of devil nobility. That said, many of these devils were influential. One thing that Naruto found awkward was how many of these devils wanted to speak with him. They would jabber on and on about this or that, asking for his opinion on matters and issues that Naruto knew nothing about. Most of them seemed to believe that he was a political savant of some kind. They certainly acted like it, or maybe they were trying to trip him up. That was also a possibility. "It's because you defeated my brother," Ravel said quietly while Rias spoke with an older devil couple, who'd been introduced as Marquis Devante and his wife. "I don't want to brag, but Riser was in the top 10 percentile in rating games. He was a strong contender with one of the best peerages. He's also a phoenix, which means he's stronger than most. The fact that you defeated him is huge." "Is that so? I hadn't realized it was such a big deal." "It wouldn't be if you were a well-known devil," Ravel admitted. The reason it's so huge is because you're a complete unknown. Nobody even knows who you are, yet you suddenly came sweeping into the raiding game, a newly reincarnated devil, and devastated my brother and his peerage like they were nothing. I think the reason everyone wants to talk to me is because I have such a pretty girl on my arm, Naruto admitted. Chew. Ravel's face burst into flames. Naruto would have laughed, but at that moment, loud shouts disrupted the festivities. How dare you? You lousy fallen prick. You've made me spill my drink. It's not my fault you're a klutz. You should stop bumping into people. Bumping into people. You're the one who bumped into me. Two people were arguing, a devil and a fallen angel. The devil had dark tan skin and spiky green hair. Tattoo designs swirled around his face, and it looked like they extended past his neck. His black and yellow shirt matched his pants, which had ornaments on it that jingled as he moved. The fallen angel that the devil was arguing with had all black clothes, wore a trench coat with a high collar, and had long black hair and equally black eyes. Both of them looked like delinquents. This is why I hate you fallen fucks. You're all a bunch of cowards who won't take responsibility for their actions. Ha! That's rich coming from devil scum like you. You want a fucking piece of me? Bring it on, you little devil bitch. Excuse me, a lilting yet petrified voice said, stopping the argument in its tracks. The girl had appeared before them. Her long blonde hair was curly and reminded Naruto of honey. Blue eyes that were like the sky peered timidly from beneath several bangs. She wore all white. Her robes were pristine, as if to emphasize this girl's purity. What do you want? The devil asked, his tone rude and his sneer ugly. I suggest you get lost, angel trash, the fallen one snarled. The poor angel girl cowed as she was put down by the two. Naruto scowled. He'd met a lot of rude people, but these two were the kind of douche nozzles that deserved an ass kicking. The devil is Zephyr Glaciolabolas, Rias informed Naruto before he could ask. I see. And I'm guessing that the fallen he's arguing with is Mistina. He certainly sounds like the hot-headed firebrand that Azazel made him out to be. The angel. I think she must be Angelus. Should we step in? Asked Kaneko. It was the first time she'd spoken in a while. Naruto turned and noticed that, sometime while he'd been talking with nobles, she'd grabbed something to eat dango, it looked like. There's no need, Ryu said. Someone is already about to intervene. A handsome man with black hair and violet eyes had stepped up to the group, placing a comforting hand on Angelus's shoulder. Sarier Bale. He stared at the two arguing teens. One thing that stood out the most to Naruto was his build. He was incredibly muscular, but it wasn't the hereditary type of muscles that most devils had. Naruto could tell from the way they flexed as he moved that this guy had undergone intense physical training. Maybe he had a trainer like Mito Guy. If that was the case, he'd be wearing green spandex. Naruto grinned as Kurama snorted with laughter, and then turned his attention back to the confrontation. I don't know the reason you two are fighting, Sarier said, his voice calm and measured. However, don't you think you two are acting a little childish, quibbling like this during an important political event? Childish? Zephyr scowled. Who the fuck do you think you are? I'm just another attendee at this function, like you, Sarier said. But unlike you, I don't want my chance to meet new people ruined. If you two have a dispute to settle, that's fine, but settle it after this party is over. Zephyr and Mistima looked like they were going to argue, but at that exact moment, the air suddenly became dense. Even from a distance, Naruto could feel it. The air around Sarier was warping, distorting. Sweat poured from the two who'd been arguing. Oddly enough, Angelus seemed unaffected. Whatever, Mistima glowered. This isn't over yet, but I'm not gonna be a jerk-off like this idiot. I should be the one saying that. Zephyr snapped. The two separated and wandered off. Sarier stared at them, as if making sure they wouldn't pick up their argument again, and then addressed the female angel, Angelus. Are you alright? Oh, yes. I am fine. Angelus beamed at Sarier. Thank you for that. I wanted to make them stop, but I'm not sure how to stop a dispute between fallen and devils. Sarier blushed and laughed at the same time. You just gotta be firm with them is all. Show them that they can't push you around and they'll back down. Yes. I'll take that to heart. Angelus said. Angelus-sama. 13 people ran up to Angelus. Their expressions ranged from worried to indignant. Naruto guessed they were Angelus's brave saints. Angelus-sama, are you okay? A young boy asked. He couldn't have been older than 10 or 12. With unruly black hair and two different colored eyes, both of which were really large, he reminded Naruto of a puppy. He could even imagine a tail wagging behind the boy. Smiling, Angelus placed a hand on the boy's head and ruffled his hair. Oh, yes. I am fine. Thank you for your concern. The boy blushed. Looking down at his toes, he mumbled, "You're welcome." Naruto wandered up to the gathering alongside Rias, Ravel, and Kaneko. Upon seeing them, Sariarg's expression brightened. "Rias, I thought you'd be here. I haven't seen you since the party celebrating the cancellation of your wedding with Riser." Still attached to Naruto's arm, Rias smiled. "Yes, well, I don't spend much time in the underworld these days." "I'm aware." Sariarg grinned before looking at Naruto. "Naruto Uzumaki. You look like you've gotten stronger." "More like I've regained some of my former strength," Naruto said, grinning. "Perhaps you and I will find ourselves facing each other in the upcoming tournament. I'd love to test my strength against a worthy opponent." Hehehe, so would I. The two grinned as the air around them gained figurative sparks. Naruto could feel his competitive spirit, which had been dormant for a long time now, begin burning. He wanted to fight this person. As the two chuckled in a manner that was quite eerie, Rias turned to Angelus. "I hope you've been enjoying the party so far." "Fue," came the intelligent response. The party lasted until well past midnight. Naruto, Rias, Ravel, Kaneko, and the others spent that time mingling. They spoke with nobles on the devil's side, archangels from the angel faction, and leaders of the Gremory. They traded conversation with their peers, and did their best to foster goodwill between the three factions. Sariarg was a huge help in this regard, perhaps because his own opinions and desires matched those of Rias and Sursage's. He seemed to hit it off with Angelus, and because Angelus approved of him, her peerage did too. That said, Naruto did remember seeing the youngest of her brave saints, giving Sariarg the stink eye. Naruto, Rias, and Ravel met with the other devils, fallen, and angels who would be competing in the tournament. This included Bure, Gremory, and Lix Tetrax. Bure was a quiet individual who enjoyed studying more than talking. They'd barely gotten his nose out of his book for 5 seconds before he started reading again. His peerage had been much more talkative and apologized on his behalf. Gremory and Lix Tetrax were more personable, though Lix's grave personality was contradictory to her tiny stature. Israel and Riul seemed like nice people, though Israel appeared, much like Bure, to be a deeper thinker at least until he opened his mouth and said something stupid. When he mentioned how fish was relevant in the Bible, Naruto realized that he was just an airhead. Riul was very kind, speaking with a friendly and open personality, but he also looked quite frail. His posture had been slumped, as if he was weighed down by an unbearable weight, and his sickly pallor made one think he was suffering from a debilitating disease. Naruto didn't know what the angels were thinking in letting him compete in a tournament. However, he hoped the angel would be okay. Kaneko remained by their side while they mingled. She didn't speak much. Naruto learned that a reason for this was because she was neither a noble, nor did she have what nobles considered a noteworthy reputation. Unlike Naruto, who had defeated Riser Phoenix, Issei who was the wielder of the boosted gear, Akeno who was Ria's queen, and Kiba who could get by on good looks alone, Kaneko was considered an unnoticeable presence, someone who was just there. Naruto didn't like that. He vowed to speak with Rias about allowing Kaneko more time in the spotlight during the upcoming tournament. He wanted everyone to know how awesome and powerful his sort of but not yet girlfriend was. Thinking of his relationships made Naruto remember how Ophis had practically ignored everyone. Several people had tried to talk her, whether because they knew who she was, or they thought she was cute he didn't know, and she told each of them to shut up because she was eating. After she'd had her fill, she wandered over to Naruto and demanded that they leave because she was bored. Of course, they couldn't leave, so Naruto had been forced to keep her busy by holding her hand the rest of the time. Ravel had not been pleased. Later that night, after the party, Naruto and the others returned home. Wallachia and Issei went into their own room with Rainer, who, as Issei's slave, was not allowed to leave his side. He and his party went into their room. Naruto was already in his pajamas. He normally didn't wear pajamas or any form of clothing when he went to bed these days. However, Ravel, Ophis, and Kaneko were going to be sleeping with him and Rias, apparently. It had been decided that he should remain fully clothed. This decision was unanimous between Rias and himself. "I don't think they're ready for that sort of progression, especially Ravel," Rias had said when he asked about it. "And to be honest, I'm not really ready for you to take that next step with them either." Naruto had conceded her point. Sitting on the bed, Naruto waited for the others to get dressed. He was decked out in his old pajamas, orange jammy pants and a white shirt. It was too bad he didn't have his old frog cap, but that had been lost when Konoha was destroyed by Nagato. "Hey, you," Kaneko said as she walked into the room from the attached restroom. You look like you're thinking deep thoughts. Not particularly, Naruto said. I was just thinking about how cute you look in those pajamas. Kaneko was wearing pink pajama shorts that showed off a good portion of her tight little bubble butt. They wrapped around her tush so tightly they might as well have been painted on. There was also a hole in the back, from which her tail sprouted out. Her spaghetti-strap shirt dangled off her shoulders, lending her a cute but sensual appearance. That, on top of her cat ears, made for an appealing sight. I'm glad you like it, Naya, Kaneko said as she crawled onto the bed. I wore these for you. Is that so? You look really cute. Kaneko continued to crawl forward until she was directly in front of Naruto, and then she kept crawling forward still, placing her hands on his shoulders and pushing him down with her rook strength. Naruto fell backwards onto the bed. Kaneko laid flat against him, slowly nuzzling her chest. Reaching up, Naruto stroked her cat ears, which elicited a light purring from the Nekomata devil hybrid. I see you two are enjoying yourselves, Rhea said as she and Ravel entered the room. Rhea was wearing a see-through nightgown. She normally slept naked, and Naruto could tell from the tension in her cheeks that she didn't like being forced to confine herself. On the other hand, Ravel seemed at home in her pink long-sleeved frilly shirt and pants. We're having a very good time, Naya, Kaneko's speech slipped, though she didn't seem to care. I'm glad to see that, but I think it's time we all got to bed. We've got a big week starting tomorrow, Rhea said. Everyone was about to climb onto the bed when Ravel paused. I just realized something. What is it, Ravel? Asked Rhea. There are 4 of us. You, me, Kaneko, and Ophis. Yes. Rhea said, seemingly not getting the point. Who gets to sleep closest to Naruto-sama? There was a poignant pause. Naruto felt the hairs on his arms and neck prickle. He didn't know how, but he could somehow sense the tension that had suddenly settled over the room like a thick cloying fog. The girls were all staring at each other, their expressions morphing into one filled with competitive spirit. I think we can decide this in a calm and logical manner, Rhea said at last. I agree, Ravel added. Bring it. Kaneko had already grabbed 2 pillows. A heavy silence passed through the room. Then, like a Miyoshiro firing a broken noble phantasm from his bow, the 3 burst into action. Pillows flew everywhere as the girls began beating each other senseless with them. Naruto watched, wondering if he should step in. It actually looked fun, and judging by the smiles on the girls' faces, they were having a blast. At the same time, they were competing for something that he couldn't compete for. It was a conundrum that he didn't know how to solve. What are they fighting over? Ophis asked as she next to him on the bed. They're fighting over who gets to sleep next to me. He turned to look at her. When did you get here? Just now. Ha. Naruto scratched the back of his head. So, are you going to go to sleep? I don't sleep. Oh? Then why did you want to sleep with me? Ophis shrugged. Everyone else was doing it. I see. That Ophis, she really knew how to hop on the bandwagon, Naruto determined silently. In the spacious room, pillows would continue to fly for quite some time. It had taken nearly an hour for Rhea to win the pillow fight. She'd done so by letting Ravel and Kaneko wear each other out, and then attack them while they were exhausted. The 2 had pouted, but since Rhea was the one letting them sleep in the same bed as Naruto, they conceded. It wasn't like it mattered anyway. Naruto had already gone to sleep by the time they finished, and Ophis had stolen the other free spot. The next morning, everyone woke up and went down to the breakfast room at Grafie's behest. Apparently, the Gremory estate had a room for each meal, one for breakfast, another for lunch, and then one for dinner, and even rooms for snack times. Naruto thought it was excessive, but he didn't say anything. Well, he did, but Rias pinched his cheek before he could finish. Then Alana and Xiaticus were already in the breakfast room when they arrived, and they weren't alone. Sitting at the table, calmly sipping tea as he spoke with his parents, Serzichus looked nothing like the demon king that was feared and respected in the underworld for his power. No longer decked out in his ceremonial armor, he wore white pajama pants, and an I love people shirt. His eyes lit up when he saw them. Itauto. Serzichus stood up. Aniki. Naruto ran forward. Itauto. Serzichus ran as well. Aniki. Naruto spread his arms. The 2 were just about to hug when a massive explosion erupted between them, sending them both flying backwards. Rias, who blasted them apart with her powers of destruction, glared at them. I believe we've seen enough of that horrid illusion, Rias said. Naruto and Serzichus sat up at the same time, rubbing their sore backsides. That was mean, sister, Serzichus said, pouting. What's mean is your illusion, Rias rebutted. Do you want to scar everyone for life? We were just going to greet each other, Naruto mumbled right before a squeak escaped his lips when Rias turned her glare on him. when she did become so scary. Sit down, Naruto, she ordered. Yes, ma'am, Naruto mumbled as he and Surziches took a seat. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Kaneko make a whipping motion to Ravel, who giggled into her hand. And my standing has officially dropped. What a loser, Rainer muttered only to yelp when Kaneko slapped her in the back. The only people allowed to make fun of Naruto are the ones in a relationship with him, Kaneko said. Slaves have no room to comment. Rainer grumbled bitterly, but she was smart enough to know when she was outnumbered. She sat next to Issei and quietly picked at her food. Everyone else sat down as well, with Ravel sitting on Naruto's right and Ophis sitting on his left. Rias and Kaneko sat next to Arena, who gazed nervously at Surziches, as if she might have a heart attack by eating next to a demon king. I'm not gonna bite, you know, Surziches said with a charming smile. Arena sent him an unsure smile of her own. Right. Naruto had to give the Gremory family credit. They hate nothing but the very best food. That morning, their breakfast consisted of thick slices of French toast, scrambled eggs with cheddar cheese, and freshly squeezed orange juice. Aside from every dish looking like something from a 5-star restaurant, it tasted phenomenal. Conversation was sparse. Ria spoke with her parents and brother in between eating. Ashia and Issei talked in hushed tones, while Rainer occasionally inputted her own sarcastic opinion. Akeno was quiet, but Kiba and Gasper had struck up a friendly conversation with Arena. Well, Kiba was talking about sword techniques. Gasper only spoke when asked a question. Turning to Ravel, he saw the girl frowning at her food. It didn't take a genius to know what she was thinking. He could practically see her thoughts. Leaning down, he whispered into her ear. Your French toast is better than this. Startled, Ravel glanced up at him, and, when she caught sight of his smile, her own lips twisted into a smile as well. Thank you, Naruto-sama. As breakfast wound to a close, Surziches coughed into his hand, gathering everyone's attention. I wanted to let all of you know how the tournament is going to work. It's basically a series of rating games in which you and another peerage will battle on a stage that will be determined at random. The tournament doesn't start for 2 weeks, which will give you plenty of time to train, and in fact, it's been decided by the leaders that everyone is going to receive 2 days of special training from one of us. By everyone, do you mean? Kiba started. I mean every single member of all the peerages. We're splitting our time between all of you to help you come into your full potential. Along with your peerage, this week we're also giving training to Angelus, Lix Tetrax, Mestima, and Sikvera Gears. Your trainers have already been selected. They'll be here to pick you up soon. Naruto wondered what kind of trainer he'd get. He supposed it didn't really matter. Whoever he got, they probably wouldn't be able to do anything to help him. He didn't need to get stronger. He needed to regain the strength he'd lost. A loud sonic boom slammed into the house. The earth shook as something hit the ground near them. This was followed by, oddly enough, someone ringing the doorbell. Naruto hadn't even realized this mansion had a doorbell. The maid soon strolled into the room and bowed politely to everyone there. Lord Surziches, Tanin has arrived to pick up Issei Hidu. Good. Surziches smiled and turned to Issei. You're awfully lucky, Ice. Unlike everyone else, Tanin is uniquely suited to training you, and is unable to properly teach anyone else due to circumstances. You'll be with him for the entire 2 weeks. Why don't you go out and greet the person who will be training you? Okay, Issei said, even though he looked confused. Standing up, Issei followed the maid outside. They listened to his footsteps recede, and then they waited the several minutes it took for Issei to reach the front door. The mansion was huge, so it took a long time. Holy shit. There's a dragon in front of the house. Issei's girlish scream was followed by a booming voice. So, you're Issei Hidu, the bearer of the Red Dragon Emperor Gauntlet. I hope you're ready to begin training. What training? More screams resounded around the mansion, reaching them even though the breakfast room was 20 rooms away. Issei's squeals became even less manly. However, they were soon overpowered by a loud flapping sound, like the beating of a massive pair of wings. As the sound faded, Naruto glanced at everyone in the room to see that their expressions mirrored his thoughts perfectly. Aniki. Yes, a Tauto. Who's Ice's trainer? Tanin is a former Dragon King. He was reincarnated by Mephistopheles into an ultimate class devil. Since then, he has earned the nicknames Blaze Meteor Dragon and Devil Dragon Saint. Since he's a dragon, he lacks the delicacy to train normal people. However, since Ice is the bearer of the boosted gear, he is a perfect match. Anyway, your trainers should also be here shortly. As if Surzich's words had dialectic powers, a magic circle appeared on the floor. It was not a symbol that Naruto recognized, though Rias did, judging by the shocked eyes she directed at her brother. You didn't. I did, Surzichus confirmed just as someone appeared within the magic circle. He had green hair, slicked back to give him an appearance that reminded Naruto of a Yakuza. His light blue eyes contrasted with his tan skin. Unlike Surzichus, who often wore ceremonial armor, Ajuka was wearing a lab coat over a colored shirt with a green cravat. Surzichus, he said, and his tone was smooth. It was the kind of voice Naruto expected to hear on a male prostitute, not a Yakuza scientist. I've come as you requested. You said that you have a favor to ask of me. That's correct. Surzichus stood up and held out his hand, which the man firmly clasped. Beelzebub, I'm sure you remember Naruto over there. Naruto. Beelzebub turned his head, his eyes locking onto Naruto, who became disturbed when his eyes lit up. Ah, yes. I remember him. So, his name is Naruto, is it? How very interesting. I'd like you to give Naruto a checkup. I also want you to help him with his training for the upcoming tournament. So I see. Beelzebub murmured, nodding to himself. Very well. Come along, Naruto. Let's head over to my lab. Eh? Wait. Hold on a second. Naruto stammered as Beelzebub walked over to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. Could you at least tell me what? But Naruto never got to finish that sentence. The next thing he knew, a magic circle had appeared underneath them, and he and Beelzebub vanished from the breakfast room. The world around him morphed, colors swirled, and everything appeared distorted. It only lasted for a second, but when the second was up, he and Beelzebub were no longer standing in the breakfast room. Instead they were inside of what looked like a lab. Where are we? Naruto asked as he looked around. There were numerous devices placed against the walls, monitors and tubes, and strange cylinders with odd-looking creatures, were all kinds of weird machines around as well. What looked like a high-tech body scanner from an anime that Rias had made him watch. Another device displayed holographic images of what looked like inventions, though Naruto couldn't tell for sure. This is my home, Beelzebub said. It looks more like a lab. That's because it is, Beelzebub said. I prefer to spend my time inventing, so I rarely leave this place. It got to the point where I spent more time in my lab than I did my mansion, so I just made this place my residence instead. Is that so? You're the first person outside of my peerage and Surzichus to have seen this place. Good to know, I think. Naruto looked around a second longer, then focused on Beelzebub. So, what are we doing here? The first thing we're going to do is run some tests, Beelzebub began. I'd like to see how the fairy piece inside of you is operating. After that, we'll be able to determine what sort of training you need to exceed your current limits. Naruto didn't know what Surzichus was thinking in having him go with this man, but he knew of Beelzebub, the creator of the evil peace system. He also knew that this man might be able to tell why he didn't have his full power. Surzichus must have known this as well. That was probably why he had asked Beelzebub to be his trainer. Alright, Naruto grinned as she slammed his left fist into his right palm. Just tell me what I'm supposed to do. The grin left as Beelzebub smiled at him. For some reason, he had a very bad feeling about being here. Apparently, telling Beelzebub to just tell me what I'm supposed to do was the wrong idea. The Demon King had gained an unusual gleam in his eyes at those words. He had then forced Naruto to strip, attached all kinds of strange nodes to his skin, and then had him do all manner of strange exercises. Of course, it didn't start out weird. In fact, the first thing Beelzebub made Naruto do was downright normal minus the fact that he was almost naked. So, all you want me to do is run on this treadmill. That's right, Beelzebub said. Just run on the treadmill. Okay. Naruto started to run on the treadmill, which moved at a slow pace. Of course, calling it a treadmill was a misnomer. Attached to the original machine were several dozen other contraptions that Naruto knew nothing about. However, these devices beeped and booped and lit up, so they must have been doing something. Standing by, watching as he ran, Beelzebub typed into a sleek black tablet. Alright, he said after several minutes. Let's make this go a little faster. Faster? Naruto was already running at a good pace. The monitor on the treadmill said 65 kilometers per hour. Well, he could easily go much faster than this. The way Beelzebub said it made the hairs on Naruto's arms prickle. I don't think I like the sound of why. Beelzebub pressed a button on his tablet, and suddenly, the treadmill went from 65 kilometers per hour to 130 kilometers per hour. Naruto squawked as he was nearly thrown off the treadmill. Pumping chakra into his legs, he increased his speed to stay on. Good. Good. Now let's go faster. Faster. Now listen here, you holy shit. Naruto couldn't even begin to guess how fast he was running now. The treadmill's monitor said XX for the speed. What did it even mean? His legs pumped fast enough that he couldn't even see them anymore. His breathing came out in nasally gasps. Sweat was bursting from his pores like water from a fountain. He didn't know how much longer he could keep this up. Matters weren't helped when Beelzebub decided to increase the speed again. He couldn't. Naruto was finally unable to keep up with the treadmill's speed and was thrown off, sailing backwards through the air, until he slammed headfirst into a wall. Everything went black. Then it went white. When Naruto came to, he was lying on the ground, amidst a pile of rubble. Beelzebub stood over him, once more typing notes into his tablet. "You managed to run at 266 kilometers per hour, he said. "That's a good pace. Now get up. We need to continue the tests." "Goo. Ugh." Naruto moaned. "At least. Give me a second to recover." The more tests they did, the more sure Naruto was that Beelzebub was trying to kill him. After the treadmill incident, Beelzebub stuck a breathing mask to his face, shoved him into a tank, and then filled the tank with water. This wouldn't have been so bad except that Beelzebub put more water into the tank than it was slated to hold. This resulted in the water pressure rising until it nearly crushed all of Naruto's bones. In order to stay alive, he'd been forced to use his six paths mode and create a shield around his body that protected him from the pressure. "That's a very interesting power you have," Beelzebub said when the test finished. "It's not a part of your devil powers. Is this from your human side?" "TCH. Naruto clicked his tongue, but since he was there to find out what was wrong with him, he explained his powers. "The Six Paths Age mode is an ability gifted to me by a man named Hagoromo Otsutsuki. It increases my strength and durability to the point where I can take even the most powerful attacks head-on, and it makes me fast enough that even the fastest knight would never be able to keep up with me." A physical transformation that augments one's natural strength to levels beyond an ultimate class devil. Beelzebub typed into his tablet. "How intriguing. I can see now why Surziches wanted me to test your abilities. Come, let us continue the tests." By the time they finished testing, Naruto felt like his body was going to break. He'd been stretched by pulleys, tortured with electricity, forced to fight against strange monsters in a dungeon, with his arms tied and his eyes blinded, while not pulling the nodes attached to his body out, and he wasn't giving any time to rest in between. When the tests concluded, Naruto could do little more than pass out. When he woke up, he was lying in bed, a plain white ceiling over his head. He wondered how he'd gotten there. However, when he realized that he had no memory of coming here, he put the thought out of his mind. Beelzebub or one of his peerage must have shoved his sorry ass into this bed after he passed out. "You're awake," a voice said somewhere in front of his bed. "I'm impressed. It's only been an hour since you passed out." "Yeah, well, I've always been quick to recover," Naruto muttered dryly. He lifted his head. Beelzebub was sitting on a stool, in front of a monitor, which was displaying the body of a person. Lines ran through the body, and certain points had been highlighted. The area around the stomach was displaying a familiar seal, the very same seal on his stomach. "I wonder if your recovery has to do with your incredible vitality or the creature sealed inside of your stomach," Beelzebub commented idly. "It is most unusual, this seal. I've never seen anything like it." "My seal is pretty out of this world," Naruto snarked as he sat up. His limbs were stiff, but he worked them out, stretching his arms over his head to remove the kinks. "Indeed. Considering you traveled through the dimensional gap to get here, I had already learned as much." "Figured you would," Naruto grunted as he stood up. "You are Nikki's best friend. So you call Surziches that even when he's not around?" "Of course." Wincing as he placed his leg on the bed, Naruto bent over and stretched his thighs out. "Kami, that hurt like a bitch. I'm going to marry Riaz at some point. That means Nikki is family." "I see. Yes, I suppose that would make the two of you family. So, what's the diagnosis? Have you discovered anything interesting?" "I've discovered several things that are interesting," Beelzebub admitted. "Your body is far stronger than most pureblood devils. In fact, I'd say that physically speaking, you might be a match for Sariarg Bale." Sariarg was known as one of the strongest devils currently alive, not in power, but physically. His physical strength was beyond what a pureblood devil could naturally produce. Riaz had told Naruto that Sariarg was literally just a few years from becoming an ultimate class devil. However, what really intrigues me are these. Beelzebub pointed at the network of lines. "I've been informed by Surziches of your chakra, and from that I can deduce that this is your chakra network that you told him about. They have a lot of energy flowing through them, more than even an ultimate class devil. I'd say that you might even have more raw power than Surziches himself. But there's a strange anomaly inside of your chakra network. Naruto walked over to Beelzebub after getting dressed. His orange shirt, black jeans, and sneakers felt like heaven after being forced to do all of Beelzebub's tests while in the buff. Did you know that more than half of your chakra is missing? Naruto paused. Kurama. I was aware that you were missing your power, but I didn't know it was that much. I think my own power kept us from noticing. Is that so? Naruto took a calming breath. I knew that my strength isn't what it used to be, but I didn't know how much weaker I've become. Well, this is mostly just guesswork, Beelzebub admitted. However, look at your chakra network. See how wide your coils are. I theorize that this is a sign that you have a lot of chakra. The wider and more durable coils are there to help regulate the immense flow of energy. It looks like your coils should be constantly filled to the brim. However, your coils currently only have enough energy flowing through them that they are about 25% full. I believe this means that more than half of your chakra, maybe as much as 75% of it, is gone. Naruto bit his thumb. He'd been aware that his chakra was weaker. It was the conclusion that he'd arrived at after his battle with Hokage, but he hadn't realized it was that much weaker. Still, to have the same amount of power as an ultimate class devil, while missing most of your energy is impressive, Beelzebub added. Yeah, Naruto murmured. However, his thoughts were not on the man before him. Where had his chakra gone? The days passed swiftly. After returning from Beelzebub's laboratory with this new information, Naruto finally had a clear understanding of why he wasn't getting any stronger. Most of his strength was still gone. Naruto had thought that his chakra situation would be rectified when his coils healed, but it turned out that wasn't the case. He didn't know what had happened. That said, he and Kurama had tried to come up with their own hypothesis. It could be similar to how my chakra was split into yin and yang. If it was split into yin and yang, then I'd only have half of my chakra. I also wouldn't be able to perform most of my jutsu. True, but I'm saying this could be something similar. Maybe someone stole your chakra after we came to this dimension. It would explain why it took becoming a devil to heal your damaged chakra coils. It was true that if most of Naruto's chakra was missing, neither he nor Kurama would be able to heal his coils. Chakra coils required chakra to function, and his had been practically gone, for all intents and purposes. However, that just begged more questions. Who had stolen his chakra and why? Outside of his chakra issues, life progressed normally. The others had all returned from their training minus Issei, who was still with Tanin. Naruto didn't know who they'd trained with. He also didn't know what kind of training they'd undergone, but the results were clear. All of them were stronger than before. It showed in their sparring session. Naruto leapt backwards as 16 bright energy spheres slammed into the ground. They exploded in brilliant gouts of light. Further hampering his vision were the dirt clods that the spheres kicked up. This meant he almost missed the sword that flashed at him like a vibrant silver streak. Naruto bent backwards to avoid the attack, but he still felt the blade cutting through the air. Holding onto the blade was Kiba. The young man wore a mild-mannered grin. Nice dodge. Nice swing. He kicked at Kiba's legs. The young man leapt backwards to avoid it and then ducked. Traveling behind the young man at high velocity was a massive ball of blackish red energy. It was Ria's power of destruction. I see. Ria's hit her attack behind Kiba, so I wouldn't see it until it was too late. Channeling wind chakra into his right hand, Naruto slammed his left foot into the ground behind him, and then launched a punch at the attack. A funnel of wind blasted out of his fist. It slammed into Ria's attack, which became warped and distorted before exploding. She must have put a lot of power into her attack since it also cancelled out his. Kiba and Kaneko double-teamed him. They came in from opposite sides, attempting to hem him in. Naruto tried to move backwards, but his left leg wouldn't work properly. When he looked down, he saw that it was grayed out, as if all the color had been sucked out of it. Gasper. Naruto winced as he blocked Kaneko's punch. Smoke rose from his hand. Kaneko's attack hadn't been just a punch. She's used Senjutsu to engulf her hand in energy, and while that hadn't increased her strength, the energy had burned him. Ifufu, let us see you dodge this, Akeno said as she flew over him. Lightning appeared in her hands, which she sent at Naruto. For his part, Naruto had to break out of Gasper's Baylor view, and then he leapt backward to avoid the lightning attacks. He expected them to strike the ground and dissipate. That didn't happen. Instead of hitting the ground, the lightning curved and chased after him. Naruto swore as he held out his hands and created a wind barrier. The attack slammed into him and pushed him back. Gritting his teeth, Naruto dug in his heels and put more chakra into his barrier. Akeno's attack was soon overpowered. It dispersed as the wind barrier nullified it. Naruto was about to breathe a sigh of relief, but then he noticed something. He was surrounded. Rias stood in front of him, a reddish-black blade of energy pointed at his neck. Kaneko was on his left. She was pointing a Senjutsu energy ball into his gut. Behind him, Kiba stood, Ascalon lightly touching the other side of his neck, while Akeno floated above him with lightning at the ready. He couldn't see Gasper, but he assumed that the half-vampire was ready with Forbidden Baylor view at any time. I believe this is our win, Rias said. So it would seem, Naruto admitted. Because of his strength, it had been decided that their spars would consist of him versus everyone else. As a group, the Gremory peerage had improved a lot. They fought as a unit instead of individuals. Naruto felt this was their greatest strength, and it would be the key to defeating the other peerages in the upcoming tournament. To prepare the group for their upcoming fights, Naruto had fought using a variety of tactics. Sometimes he would use shadow clones to fight as his own one-man squad. Other times he would fight as an individual with overwhelming power. Each time, Rias and the others needed to work together if they wanted to overcome him. They hadn't been good at first. Naruto was a monster on the battlefield. He used tactics that they had never seen, fought with trickery and deceit, and he knew all of their strengths and weaknesses, which meant they couldn't deceive him. However, as the days passed, the group improved, becoming better with every consecutive defeat. These days, provided Naruto wasn't going full power, they could defeat him 4 out of every 10 battles. Considering how none of their opponents were likely to be as strong as him, save perhaps Sariarg, Naruto felt they were ready for whatever came their way. Of course, sparring wasn't the only thing they did. Every morning they would exercise as a group, and every evening they would study tactics. Their teamwork had improved by leaps and bounds. The only problem was Ashia. Without Issei there, the poor girl was like a wilted flower. He understood how hard this was for her, as Issei had been her rock since before she became a demon. Naruto and Rias did what they could for her. They made sure Ashia was constantly working to improve her abilities, keeping her occupied with training instead of thinking about her boyfriend, who was currently still training with Tanin. Fortunately for them, Reiner was also with Ashia. Though she acted rude and crass, the fallen angel spent more time with Ashia than anyone else, and Naruto had seen her letting the blonde girl use her lap as a pillow, when she thought no one was looking. He guessed even someone like Reiner would find it hard to hate the girl. Ravel, who was not part of the session because she wasn't in Ria's peerage, went up to Naruto and handed him a towel and a bottle of water. Here, Naruto-sama. You look exhausted. Thanks. Naruto smiled at the girl before taking several large gulps of water. His throat was parched. He was also really hot, so he dumped whatever was left on his head to cool off. A loud squeak drew his attention back to Ravel. He blinked. She was staring at him with a combusting face and fire on her head. For a moment, he wondered if something weird had happened to her, but then he realized the cause was because he was now soaking wet. And shirtless. Ravel's a perv, Kaneko said, her cat ears twitching. The blush staining Ravel's cheeks deepened. I am not. Kachitori is a pervert. You? Shut up right this instant. With Kaneko teasing a flustered Ravel, the group made their way up to the mansion. Before they could actually go inside, however, a loud sound that reminded Naruto of the dying squeals of a pig echoed all around them. It was coming from above. The group looked up to see Tanin swooping toward them. Clinging to his back, screaming like a child whose balls had yet to drop, Issei Hidu had never looked more pathetic. The air blasted in their faces as Tanin landed on the ground. Issei almost fell off, but the massive dragon caught him and set the disoriented boy on the ground. The boy fell onto his back, his eyes rolling inside of his head. Tanin was a giant dragon with what Naruto learned was called a Western appearance. His body wasn't long, but stocky and large. Thick muscles wrapped around his arms and legs, and purple scales gleamed in the afternoon sun. Pinions that spanned several meters stretched out before retracting. His reptilian head tilted to look at them, rhomboidal eyes gleaming as he focused on them one by one. Eyes. Ashia ran up to the unconscious Issei, who had drool leaking from his mouth. Reiner looked like she wanted to do the same, but she held back and slowly walked over with a sneer marring her face. I have come to drop Issei off, Tanin boomed as Ashia began trying to heal Issei, even though it didn't look like he was injured. Thank you, Tanin-san, Ria said with a gracious bow of her head. I appreciate you helping Ice. You're welcome, Ria's Gremory, Tanin said. It was interesting to train the bearer of the boosted gear. I look forward to see how strong he becomes in the future. Apparently finished speaking, Tanin gave a mighty flap of his wings. Naruto and the others covered their face as dust blasted into their eyes. When they no longer had to worry about the dust, they looked up to find Tanin already soaring off into the distance. Issei-san. Issei-san. Ashia was still shaking poor Issei, who looked like someone who'd just gone through hell. Ophis, the young pervert muttered weakly. While the Gremory group worked most of the day, that didn't mean they neglected their rest. It was important to relax. Those who kept working would only find themselves regressing, the talents and strengths they cultivated so much becoming dull with exhaustion. That was why, after Issei had been dropped off, she told the group to spend the rest of the day taking it easy. Naruto wandered the halls, wondering what he should do. Kaneko and Ravel were somewhere together, and Rias had decided to spend time with Akeno. Issei was probably still passed out. While Naruto could have gone to see Kibber Gasper, he didn't really feel like it, and Ophis had disappeared somewhere. He was alone. A sound from behind made his ears twitch. Or not. Looking behind him, Naruto frowned when he saw a head of red hair sticking out from behind his suit of decorative armor. It was the same red as Ria's and Surzuch's. I wonder. Naruto turned around and began walking again. Behind him, the footsteps began moving again. Naruto stopped and turned around. A little boy was walking behind him, his red hair and greenish-blue eyes eerily similar to Ria's. When the boy realized that Naruto had stopped and was now staring at him, he squeaked and hid behind a dresser. Hiding isn't going to help you now that I've seen you. The boy ate. Naruto snorted. You're Milika's Gremory, right? Aniki's son. Milika's poked his head out from behind the dresser. Ah, yes, that is correct. And you're Naruto-sama. That's me. Ryuzni-sama and Otu-sama are always talking about you. And you were curious enough that you decided to spy on me. An embarrassed blush spread across Milika's face. I am sorry. With his lips twisting into a half-smile, Naruto said, don't worry about it. Anyway, why don't you walk up here with me? I'm still getting used to this place, so maybe you could show me around. Milika's eyes whitened. I'd be happy to. That was how Naruto spent the next several hours with Milika's Gremory. He was a very polite boy, always referring to him as Naruto-sama, and speaking in a soft-spoken, respectful tone of voice. To be honest, it kind of bothered Naruto, who was used to strong-willed people like Surzuch's and Rias, but he assumed the child's attitude was the result of his mother's raising. Milika struck him as an intelligent child, and it showed in his vocabulary, which was far superior to Naruto's own. This also bothered him. Every time the boy opened his mouth, Naruto felt like an idiot. That said, he couldn't hate the boy, who spoke to him so enthusiastically and joyfully that it was contagious. Sadly, their time came to an end when Grafia and Venelana suddenly appeared around the corner. There you are, Milikas. Grafia wore a stern frown as she spoke. I believe I told you not to run off during lessons. How many times does this make now? Milikas wilted under his mother's stare. I'm sorry. Bowing to Naruto, Grafia said, I apologize if my son has bothered you, Naruto-sama. Don't worry about it. Your son hasn't bothered me at all. Naruto placed a hand on Milika's head and ruffled his hair. In fact, your son was kind enough to show me around. Grafia raised an eyebrow. Is that so? It's so. In that case, I appreciate you taking care of my son, Grafia said before looking at her son. Come along, Milikas. It's time for your lessons. Naruto almost winced when Milikas slowly dragged himself over to his mom. He was right. Grafia was a controlling mom who probably never let her kid have any fun, and that was why Milikas acted like a ninny. Well, it's not really my business to interfere in the relationship between a child and his mother. You would be the scum of the earth if you did. Right? Actually. Venelana started, clapping her hands together. I believe it would be a good idea for Naruto to come with us. Alarm bells went off inside of Naruto's head. For some reason that he couldn't quite fathom, he felt the hair on his neck prickle. I'm not so sure that's a good. Why not? You do not have anything better to do you? Venelana asked, smiling. Naruto felt the blood drain from his face. After all, have you not just been wandering aimlessly for the past few hours? In which case, what harm could there be in coming with us? Venelana slid up to him, and, before he knew what was happening, she had grabbed onto his arm and was dragging him down the hall. Naruto didn't know why, but he felt like crying. It turned out that what Venelana wanted to do was teach Naruto about Devil Society alongside Milikas. Naruto could already assume the reason. Since he and Rias were dating, and it looked very much like Venelana wanted him to become her son-in-law, she was striving to ensure that he knew everything he needed to not embarrass himself in high society. Too bad Naruto hated learning. One of the most important things to know about Devil Society isn't etiquette, but who isn't important, Venelana was saying. Being powerful can get you through most situations. However, even the powerful cannot get away with not knowing all of the most important figures in our world. Naruto tried to pay attention to what Venelana was teaching him. She was doing this to help him. Well, technically, she was doing this to help herself, but in helping herself, she would help him. That was why he strived to pay attention. Sadly, the subject she was teaching was just so boring. It was like listening to someone lecturing on ancient history. His mind wandered. The most important among our kind are the 72 pillars, Venelana continued. They are the foundations to our society. Sitting beside Naruto, intently listening to every word spoken as if it was the gospel truth, Milika stared at Venelana with an intensity that frightened Naruto. Just where had that shy child gone? He's even taking notes. You could learn a thing or two from him. You know, I've never been a good note-taker. True. Using your brain has never been your strong point. Ouch. Naruto-san, Venelana said. Are you following along? Yes, Naruto lied, keeping his face straight. Good. Then please name the current 72 pillars. Naruto groaned. Yeah, today was a bad day. Hot springs really were the best, Naruto concluded as he soaked in the steaming hot water. It seemed as if all his fatigue was washing away. He was alone at the moment. Everyone else had gone into the hot springs earlier, but he'd been stuck with Venelana. After being unable to name even one of the 72 pillars outside of the Gremory and Citri families, she'd given him a stern lecture, which had lasted for about 2 hours. He had nearly missed dinner. The sound of the door sliding open made Naruto turn his head. Issei walked into the hot springs and waded into the water, until he was sitting several feet from Naruto. Sensei, Issei greeted. He sounded less melancholy than he had weeks ago, but Naruto thought there was still some depression in his voice. How was your training with Tanin? Asked Naruto. Issei shivered. Don't remind me of that. It was the most awful time ever. That bad, huh? You don't understand. He took me out to the middle of nowhere, made me fight him while he tried to kill, and then had me sleep outside with nothing to do but stare at the sky and try to find food. That doesn't sound bad to me. I couldn't see Ashia's Ophis at all. Naruto almost snorted. So that's what's bothering him. It was actually good to see Issei thinking about breasts. The boy was, for all intents and purposes, a normal teenager with an unhealthy obsession for boobs. Ever since Akeno had broken up with him, Issei seemed to have not had a single perverted thought. He didn't try to peek down Ashia's shirt. He didn't get that lecherous look when Ashia pushed her breast into his arm. For a young man with a more than healthy libido, seeing him not get worked up like he used to was worrying. This change was nice. I see. Yeah, it would be hard for me if I had to be apart from Rias for that long, Naruto said, trying to sympathize. He wasn't as open with his desires as Issei was, but he could admit that not being able to see Rias, not being able to sleep with her or have sex with her, would be tough. Why aren't you with Ashia right now? Naruto asked. His question was the wrong thing to ask. Issei's expression wilted a bit, and his shoulders slumped. Because I'm not sure what I should do anymore. Even though she broke up with me, I still love Akeno. I've tried to be strong for Ashia, but without Akeno, I haven't been able to feel complete. I think Ashia can sense this. To be honest, I feel like she's been the strong one, not me. She's been doing her best to support me, but all I've done is mope. So that was it. Issei was feeling weak because he couldn't do anything. Naruto understood the feeling. Back when he'd been a genin, back during his time at the academy. Even though he'd had a never say die attitude, he'd always felt weak, incapable. Perhaps that was why he had pushed himself so hard, boasted about his own talents so much. He'd simply been an idiot tooting his own horn. You know, my sensei once told me that when a man is rejected by the woman he loves, there are only 3 things he can do. Naruto held up a hand as he listed those 3 things off. He can forget about her, he can keep trying to win her affection, or he can support her decision and do whatever he can to help her. I'd like to try number 2, but I don't know if it's even possible, Issei admitted. Naruto stood up. He'd been in there for a good amount of time. It was time to get out. Unfortunately, I can't tell you which path is the right one, Naruto said. All I can do is lay them out for you to choose. Naruto left a contemplative Issei behind, got dressed, and wandered back to his bedroom. He couldn't choose Issei's path for him. Sadly, the best thing he could do was parrot the advice that his sensei, Jiraiya, had given him. He hoped it would be enough. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.